Good morning, everyone. Um, on this probably end of your semesters, or maybe you're in a quarter system, but for most of you, you're probably end of semester. Um, See how people are doing, and then we'll dive right into our paper for the day. We're finishing up tomorrow, and then my grading for Inslee will be next week. Jamie, how are you doing?
Hey, I am done next Wednesday and very excited about it.
Yeah.
And then grades are due the 20th. So we've got a nice little crunch in there.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's a decent. I have to turn my grades around insanely quickly, which is why, like, I'm dreading next week. That I would take the 20th in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I actually have a TA, so I'm not grading
Oh,
this
God.
semester.
You've been
I
waiting
know,
for
I
that
know.
forever.
I really lucked out, and my TA is amazing,
Nice.
and that has saved me a lot. I recommend getting one if you don't have.
Yeah, I can see why. Karen, how are you doing?
Oh, hey everyone from Georgia. I'm at the end of a sabbatical, so I'm kind of sad.
Oh,
I'm not going to say anything more because you guys will throw daggers at me, but
yeah.
I feel for
I don't know.
everyone.
You could have a TA grading for you. I can't decide which is worse from my perspective. So.
Yeah, no, I feel I'm so pleased that so many of you came through the semester with flying colors. I don't think I could have done it. I'm pretty glad that I had a respite. You guys are soldiers. So
Nancy, good morning.
Morning all. We are finishing up prep week that used to be called dead week, but now it's prep week tomorrow and finals are next week. And TA, what is this thing of which you speak?
I know, really.
I haven't had a TA in a very long time. It's all good. The hardest thing that's going to happen is I'm teaching summer classes a week after finals week. So I'm going to have 2 weeks to finish my grades and start to get my grade, like to start for summer class. So anyway.
Cool, thank you. Christina, how are you doing? I think you're muted.
You're right. You'd think by now we'd have that sorted. My Zoom decided it needed to update, so I'm using the browser Zoom.
Almost made it through my first meeting in a month without somebody having to update their Zoom.
Nope. I guess I'd been postponing it too long. But I'm an Iracta postdoc at UAB, so I'm in Palm as a mentee. And this has been my first semester in STEM ed research. I was doing a microbiology before that, and so this has been a steep learning curve of IRB and dealing with 500 emails in a day to consent students when you don't get IRB approval until the last week of the semester. So it's been some craziness, and hopefully next week we'll start less craziness because we're on a semester system and all of the munchkins will be gone for the next 3 months.
Always a good thing. Yes.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm still new to this.
Right. Brittany, how are we doing?
There we go. Hi, everyone. My semester started a little late. I'm also an Iracta postdoc, Christina. I'm at UNC Chapel Hill, but today I'm at Pembroke. This is where I teach. So I'm about 2 hours south. It's a long commute. But we didn't start till February. I think they wanted to get caseloads down after Christmas since most of our students are on campus, attending either hybrids or almost all like some form of hybrid class. So I still have 2 weeks of class after this week and then finals. So my final is until end of May. But they didn't get any kind of break either. We had no spring break. We had some wellness days. But when your wellness day is in the middle, it's like a Tuesday, you know, how much wellness are you getting on a Tuesday? So I tried to kind of incorporate some breaks for them, but it still feels like a slog right now. And we're still learning new content because this is intro bio. And, you know, when you're not in charge of a curriculum, you just teach like this ridiculous book. So I've definitely kind of taken the semester in my own hands and have lost a lot of chapters because especially now new content is woof. So we're getting there, but we're on ecology, so that's sort of more fun, I guess. Today we're talking about biomes, and they get to you know, pick an animal that's most adapted to a biome. So hopefully it's more fun than membrane transport.
Yeah, that's one would hope. And I have yet to hear anybody say something nice about wellness days for all the people that didn't get one. It was a good attempt, I guess, all around, but nobody seems to have said that was a particularly effective way of substituting a spring break.
It was only for students. It was not wellness day. I had 5.5 hours of Zoom meetings on my wellness day because they were like, oh, everybody's around.
Yeah, exactly.
No faculty wellness days, just students.
Stephanie, how are we doing?
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm at UA Little Rock. I am also teaching intro bio. And I had my students do presentations on all the chapters that we didn't cover, or they got to pick a chapter. So that's what I've done this week, to be like, yeah, sure, we did that. But they just had to pick one of the rest of the chapters in the book. And I just wanted to, this is just a fun fact. I was really excited because yesterday I participated in a Twitter poster session. My students made these little GIF Twitter posters from my developmental biology class. And so I've learned a lot of Twitter this week and got us out there on Twitter. So it was really fun.
Nice. Thank you. And then Josephine, how are we doing?
Hi, I'm Josephine Abamoyi, and I'm sorry I came in late.
Oh, good.
I was actually at this meeting briefly last time, and I said I
remember, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm from St. Xavier University in Chicago, and I teach, right now I teach microbiology to nursing major students and a few others that want to major in dentistry.
Oh, yeah.
But I have taught intro biology for a while, and so I can relate to this. I heard people talking about breaks. We didn't have any break either, but because we're a Catholic school, we got to have an Easter break. So that was kind of a nice break to our to the rigorous teaching online. I heard people talking about projects. I wasn't sure if we had some kind of focus to discuss. My students are currently working on a project, which I always incorporate into most of my teaching. At the end of the semester, I know they are busy with other courses. So this is always a nice time for them to get together and learn how to work in groups. So, and this is our last week of teaching too.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So the paper that we're looking at today, I found interesting because it's something that I think we've all thought about, and maybe we've tried to get creative about it, but it's sort of a hard thing to try to wrap your brain around and improve on, and that is what to do on the first day of school. When you have the students for the first time, what do you do in class that helps to set the tone for what's going to happen and what you expect to happen going forward? So a couple fun things here with the authors. The name A. Kelly Lane meant something to me, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I went back and looked in my records. When she was a postdoc at UGA, she actually came here to Hampden-Sydney and did a seminar. I invited her. This was when she was still talking about straight up bioinformatics and genomics type work. And so it's cool to see that she seems to have moved to Minneapolis and transitioned into biology teaching work as opposed to laboratory work. So it's always neat to see somebody move on like this. And then Claire Meters, the second author, is actually part of our network and was at our last session a week ago. And so when we had the conversation, it was kind of neat having the author there because we just go through things. And I'm like, so Claire, what did you think when you did that? Like, what was your intention? So I tried to absorb information from that as we have this discussion here today about what the authors were going for and how things worked out for them. And so what you have here is survey work done pretty much all, well, not pretty much, definitely all at R1 institutions. So results may vary at smaller schools or schools with slightly different missions. All three research intensive doctoral, 2 public. The third is both public and private. And if you're in the know, Cornell is the only school I'm aware of that plays the half public, half private game. So that revealed that one. And so what they are trying to do is do some coding work. And Jamie and I are both in a group that are learning sort of on the fly how coding actually works. I had never done this before for stuff we're trying to publish with respect to Palm. Going through interviews and collecting recurrent themes, topics that are noted in interviews with respect to how faculty choose to use that first day, what they choose to cover, how they choose to structure the class, and what they hope to accomplish at the end of that first day. Importantly, there's this stuff called instructor talk. So there was already an idea, sort of a framework in place for coding what was happening in situations like this. And one of the things this paper tries to address is how well their particular codes fit with this existing instructor talk framework. And the spoiler alert, if you guys hadn't seen this part, said it matches pretty well. They had to tweak a little bit in order to get the terminology exactly right, but by and large, they could fit what they're looking at against that pre-existing framework. So with all of that said, I get all the way down here, they collect and visualize their data, and our intent is to go in and just understand the framework and the range of options available to us for that first day presentation. And so it's a good opportunity for us to look at what these instructors are doing, but also to discuss amongst ourselves how we have chosen as a group to handle this first day. In the first 2 discussions of this paper, I've learned a bunch of stuff. I've learned about what's called a liquid syllabus, like an online sort of almost a flipped syllabus component where you record a video about your expectations and then spend that first day talking more about maybe about content, but more about just ground rules, groundwork for the class, things like that. I didn't know what that was, so that was new for me. The way in which people incorporate content in the first day and the approach they take to sort of make a class more approachable, things like that. So I think what I would open with is to ask people about their take on that first day of class and how they approach introducing a class to get started. And I should mention, by the way, this particular paper focuses on the introductory level. And so your results may vary if you're talking to more advanced students or a more advanced class. So how do you guys handle this first day? Yeah. Karen.
So I'm kind of in the camp that I want to start getting into content a little bit and not spend so much time on the boilerplate of the syllabus. So I know that first day is a transition for all of us, including myself, in terms of, going from where I was into this intense semester. And I think it's the same for students. So my content is usually over half of the first class, but it's usually some kind of game that tries to connect the students' pre-knowledge to where we're going. I'm a huge fan of Taboo, making Taboo cards that have terms that they might recognize from their high school, and then giving them terms that they can't use and describing it to a group. And so I usually turn it into something playful like that. And then in terms of the nuts and bolts, the expectations I feel are really important, but I also, when possible, and I'm at a small institution, so this is going to be very different from the R1 model, but I also make sure that students come in small groups to my office hours in the first week to answer specific questions on the syllabus. So I'm kind of in the content camp, but not like hardcore, kind of more like, some of this and this is where we're going with it.
Mm-hmm. And I think I am kind of on your same page, Karen, that I absolutely do content on the first day, but I do content in the sense of, let me introduce you to the field as a whole. Let me try to attract you into what we're going to do. Every spring I teach our genetics and cell biology course. And over the years, I've adopted a much more molecular focus to it. When I first started, I was teaching very classical approaches at the beginning. And then I realized, or I felt like it wasn't doing them any favors, honestly, with respect to what was coming. It's a controversial topic. I don't want to abandon it completely, but I don't want to spend a month on Punnett squares either, right? So that first day is where I take the opportunity to say, look, here's how you've probably thought about genetics before. Here's how I'm going to address genetics. And so it's a way to get people primed for the way things are going to go, but also to hopefully get them excited about it. When we get into the instructor talk thing here in a few minutes, we can talk about the idea of teaching wonder. I'm a big one of those. And so what we can do to get people excited about the material on that first day. And in the case of a subject like genetics, to make them less intimidated by it. I mean, since I've done this for so long, I forget that people sometimes think about molecular biology the way that I'm used to thinking about organic chemistry or something like that, that it's one of those bugaboo subjects that some people look at as just like an obstruction to medical school or something like that. And so what can I do to make it that much more attractive to you? So other people's thoughts on how they handle this.
I don't know if this has been a discussion at others institutions, but here there's been a lot of discussion about like what like we all usually have to have some sort of like disabilities statement in our syllabus, but there are a lot of resources, especially if you are at a bigger R1 institution, that students could access. So at UAB, we have like food banks, we have counseling, we have like, there's a wide range of things that most of the time it seems students don't know about. Yeah. And so this semester, the faculty that I'm working with added all of that to her syllabus. Like, here is where you get counseling, and this is what students are entitled to. Here is where you can like get food. Here is where you can talk to people about shelter concerns, or and putting all of that in your syllabus as a way to like get students to know what they need, not just to survive this semester in your course, but to really thrive as just a human in this crazy time period. I don't really know, because I know most students are always going to be, well, I looked at the course calendar and that's the only part of the syllabus I read anyway. So I'm interested in seeing if that's really a thing that they acknowledge, or if that's just busy work that makes her feel better.
Interesting. I'm struck by, we've sort of jokingly said, not for first day of class, but literally freshman orientation, when we first get the students together, there's that Prince lyric, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered together to get through this thing called life." And that's what I'm thinking about as you're describing sort of like all the different resources that are available to the students. And so the comprehensive approach, especially as we've, I think, done a much better job in the last couple of years of considering and really thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, can be a good thing. I'd be curious to know how that's received over time. I do want to highlight, and Stephanie has her hand up, Karen put a really nice comment in here about the content issue. If done well, the content on the first day can be bookended at the end to help students see how their ideas on the subject has changed. So yeah, I like that idea of perception. Just I'll go back to my example, what you think genetics are, and then what genetics maybe actually are once I've actually given you an explanation. So thank you, Karen, for that. Stephanie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that I do is because I use iClicker, I try to make sure we practice that on the first day. And I kind of then combine that with like some getting to know you questions. So, you know, we might practice a multiple choice about, you know, how long have you been at UALR? Because I teach like a core course that people might not necessarily take their first semester. I will do like a screenshot of like a Google search of cute animals, and we'll practice a target question by clicking on the cutest animal. And also using that as like a thing, like we all have different opinions on what's cute. And this, you know, tool is allowing everyone to respond. And so I try to like use my iClicker because I might have more than 50 students in a typical core class. And so just using that as a way for them to attempt to show them that I want their participation, and this is a tool that we're going to use to get that.
Cool, thank you for that. Rivka, how are you doing, first of all, since you just got here, and what is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks. I'm doing hanging in there.
Good.
Semester's
That's
almost
how we
over.
all feel, right? Yeah. Good.
Just gotta push on through.
Yeah.
But you know, I also teach a genetics course, and I think like you, Mike, a lot of what you were saying was really resonating with me. That I do try just to. It's a very slow, you know, almost like a week-long introduction to the content. You know, and just an overview about genetics. That the course might focus on transmission genetics, but we can't talk about that without really understanding the molecular aspect. And you and I maybe should talk more about just, you know, the relevance of molecular biology in a, you know, like an introductory course, but I'd love to have that discussion at another time.
For sure, yeah.
I will say that, you know, as I've incorporated more active learning strategies in a flipped classroom, I've altered what I do on the first day, and that a lot of it is, you know, why am I incorporating a flipped classroom, like, and team-based learning? What's the value to students? And just getting that, you know, that hopefully that buy-in from them, and, you know, like showing them some data from my classes, or, you know, and this is why this is a good practice. Because some of them are really, you know, unfamiliar, or like, what, you know, I have to be prepared for each class, and I've done the reading for each class. Like, why are you asking me to do that? But I will say that one time I had a student push back really hard against, like in the middle of class, against this. And I think, you know, like, I don't know how I presented it and why she pushed back so hard, but you know, that was an interesting, you know, an interesting unforeseen event that happened from spending time on the teaching methodologies.
Huh. You don't remember what the objection was?
Yeah, so I think that I presented the data from my classes, and I think that in addition to you know, some data from other papers, and I think she misunderstood that as this was like an experimental thing that I was using to like push my own agenda, and not like, you know, that this isn't a validated you know, method of teaching a best practice.
Oh.
And you know, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, you never know how people are going to react about things like that until you put it out there. It's like every time you see, and explain to the students, every time you see some very precise thing written into a syllabus or something like that, there's always a precipitating incident that caused it. It's like, okay, what's the origin story behind this line and this line, things like that. Brittany, your thoughts?
So just one thing to add, I mean, all of these are super great and really interesting. I thought this was an interesting semester for me because I taught, my class is totally in person. It's a really small class. It's like 15 students in a room for 50. Cool. But we kind of had to cover a lot of, they're also mostly freshmen, meaning this is their first year in college, but also I was probably their first in-person class. Mm-hmm. And we really had to cover a lot of like health and safety. and also just like, what is it like to be a normal person again? And like, what can our normal look like? So there was a lot of talking about resources. There was a lot of like, you know, your normal expectation is when you're not feeling well, don't come to class. But this is COVID. So if you're not feeling well, don't come to class and we will figure it out. And yeah, just kind of like relearning for all of us what it's like to be around each other. And for us, for me, the biggest skill I want them to learn out of this intro-bio class is how to concept map. And so we concept mapped from the first day. We defined life and made a gigantic concept map, which was helpful. Well, I made, they watched, and then since then they've made like 50 concept maps and they hate me for it.
And that's how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this will be useful no matter what. And maybe they'll believe me. But yeah, just kind of like relearning what it's like to sit with other people again and feel safe. Yeah. So there was a lot of that.
Jamie.
Yeah, so I don't know how to put my hand back down. I'll figure it out. Oh, thanks.
I've
never used that feature before.
I'm on it.
Yeah, so I know I definitely do a lot of the policies and basic information, but I was definitely one of those faculty that ran into a lot of cheating problems in the fall when everything moved online. So I did have to update my syllabus. And unfortunately, all the cheating problems kind of happened halfway through the semester last fall. So it wasn't as useful, I guess, halfway through the fall. But for this upcoming semester, I actually did spend a bunch of time with the students talking about academic integrity and what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And it was just something that I kind of thought that the students should know, because I teach juniors and seniors. So I just kind of, the fact that they were posting my homework and lab questions on Chegg, to me was like, you guys should know better than that. Maybe freshmen don't quite understand, but like juniors and seniors should know. So that was really disappointing in the fall, but I like and it was just something I always like quickly went through in the syllabus or never at all. So I did actually spend a bunch of time the first day of class, not reprimanding my spring students because I hadn't had them yet, but just to have an open discussion in terms of like, you know, this is a problem that's happening and I just want to set the expectations for you guys in terms of what's acceptable in my class, what's not acceptable, and then just, you know, have the conversation about like, if you're struggling, come talk to me, like don't use these resources, like come talk to me instead. I have a TA, come talk to the TA, like don't resort to that. Like there are so many other things that you can do rather than resorting to that, because I'll find you. Like that's pretty much the way that it works. I was like, and I don't want to find you. I'm not looking to find you. But when I see things that are really out of the ordinary, we're going to investigate them. So I never thought that I would have to start a discussion on ethics, but I think that in the sciences, that's probably not an awful thing to discuss a little bit more. And as these students, you know, keep on moving up, I'm sure that there are many people here who have had questions on Chegg that don't know it yet. So I think that if they haven't been caught as freshman or sophomore, there's a good chance as I get them as a junior, this might be the first time that they hear that that is not acceptable. Because I did actually run into a fair amount of students tell me, well, it wasn't in my syllabus that I couldn't use Course Hero. It wasn't in my syllabus. And I was like, I didn't know what this website was before. So I like revamped that part of my syllabus. I have like a nice table of acceptable, non-acceptable, and we just have an open discussion. They ask me any questions they want about it. And not really how I wanted to spend the first day, but having that open discussion. I think I haven't had any cheating problems yet this year, but I kind of, as a warning, if nobody's had that happen, I was the first one on my campus to actually have that as a problem, and now more and more are starting to. So I think that just being open and honest with the students and letting them have those discussions with me rather than I catch them and they get a 0 and then they hate me, is now how I'm unfortunately going to start all of my.
Yeah, but you learn the necessity of it, and you can actually use a version of that anecdote as an explanation of why you're going to all that trouble. You're not just doing it to be a bad person or something, right? Like you have experience with this, and this is how we need to deal with it. Christina actually puts a really nice summary statement for this. Training our students to be ethical professionals is at least as important as the course content. That's a nice way of saying that. I wanted to go back a few minutes ago. Karen put an interesting question into the chat. Can we also share, whoops, I popped off my screen. Can we also share our ideas on conveying our personal identity statements as a way to introduce DEI into our intro classrooms? And I'm wondering, Karen, if you might explain that question a little bit.
Yeah, I am learning from some of my colleagues at my institution that it's pretty common practice, even before the last 2 years, for professors sometimes to say what their position is. Maybe it's a more of a position statement, and certainly now, as we're trying to acknowledge privilege and acknowledge systemic racism, to how to do that effectively on the first day in a way that kind of reveals our, we want to talk about it. We're still working on how to figure it out. This is my connection to it. I'm just wondering, this is something that I want to develop. It'll take time and many iterations, but I think in genetics, where the focus is on differences and variation, it's really important in a class like that to come at it very hard. And I am nervous because I'm not good at it, but I think it's a really important thing to say on the first day, to demonstrate I'm not perfect. I'm part of the problem. Genetics is part of the problem. This is going to be hard. But genetics is also the basis of our discipline. So I just—
And how do we use genetics? I teach a bioethics course in non-majors as well. And so the topic of how do we use genetics as a weapon for our political gain if we want to choose to do that. And so I skipped down here to figure 3 for a second, just to show you that one of the things that they looked for in coding was promoting diversity in STEM, which is a subset of what you're talking about, and how it isn't seen that much. But if you come back and did this again in a couple of years, I imagine you're going to see that more and more.
Yeah. Did Clara talk about that at all with you guys in that previous session?
A little bit. She mentioned that they put it in there as just something just to see how it would go. And they literally quote in this paper, one instructor promoted diversity in STEM. And so here's the money quote here. I try so hard to make this an inclusive, respectful classroom. Is there everything I can ever do to make it more so? Please tell me, because that's something I care deeply about. And that's as close as we got in here to talking about inclusivity in the classroom. But I would expect that to emerge more commonly as things go forward. So how do other people address that, to Karen's question?
I'm still learning how to do that.
I think we all are, yeah.
So I kind of count myself as a student teacher right now because this is my first semester.
Sure.
And so presenting my—
You haven't figured it out yet?
Yeah, fun. That was day one. But it was kind of easy and sort of fun to give my identity to my students, especially because they're first years too. So it was almost presented as we're sort of in this together. And that, I think, maybe demystified the course a little bit. The other thing, it was kind of funny because this was the first paper we talked about was about defining student success. And fortunately, I had very good mentors give me student info sheets for the first day that already asked my students to define success for themselves. Like, what are your goals for this course? What are your goals for the next 3 months? And I used that in a way to kind of shape what my goals for the class are. Like most of my students, their goals were not an A. It was to pass all their classes or, to move out of their parents' house. Like I don't know, it really framed me thinking about the semester, thinking about the fact that my students have loftier goals than getting an A in my class. And that sort of changed my expectations. And I talked to them about this. Not that, like, no, everybody just says they wants to pass this class. So who cares what happens?
I think sometimes with us and all of our respective type A personalities for where we are, that we sometimes think that's the be all and end all. And so that's a very revealing question you asked there.
And it's really changed what I'm super proud of my students for doing. And we have a system here called Kudos, where you can give your students kudos. And what I see is like kudos for getting over 100 on the exam. And I'll kudos my students for like showing up for 3 classes in a row, or like completing all their assignments for an entire unit. They turned everything in. And like last semester, they failed all their classes. And that tells me that they're completely changing the way that they approach college. And I want to totally recognize them for that. Because they may never get a kudos if they're waiting to get 100% on an exam, but they don't care. They're not trying to get 100%. They're trying to get a college degree, and you don't need an A to get a college degree. So yeah, I think being really upfront and transparent about making a course to measure their success, not mine, has been it's been good for this class, for this intro class. You know, I think it changes when you're teaching an upper level genetics class, and you probably have a lot more students that, you know, are gunning for med school than.
Of course. Yeah, and result, I mean, that's why it's important to emphasize in this particular paper, we're talking about introductory level class. Results may vary, of course. But that's really interesting, actually, because it would frame for the instructor very well sort of where everybody is and what you might expect from students in the course of a semester. Now, if you have 300 students, that's going to be hard to do, right? But for classes where that's a manageable number of people, that's certainly an intriguing strategy. Anybody else on that? How they handle sort of learning about their students and bringing some of these DEI questions to the fore?
Sorry, I'm not sure if you can raise your hand in the online version, but so this semester I was facilitating a class that was a pedagogy class for learning assistants in and so we made, and they were all doing their sessions virtually this semester. So we gave them workshops on virtual tools. And one of the things that I had learned, I think from the SABRE happy hours or social hours or things, was how to make little, we called them business cards, but I think I called them like info cards about themselves as a class worksheet. So like each class had a Padlet, and they could make little business cards about themselves and their, and that didn't go away. So like they could refer back to them about like, oh yeah, this student had said, and I think I asked them their year, a picture of something, like their favorite meme and their goal for the semester. And that was a way to not spend too much class time and not force them to be too personal.
Or God help us, do an icebreaker. I'm not an icebreaker person.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a really cool way of doing it too, right? Like you sort of learn those things sort of just by your own data collection, for lack of a better term, like on the first day there. Cool. Jamie, give your hand up.
Yeah, so both the main classes that I teach are interesting in that they're lab lecture combinations. And they do have to work in lab partners or lab groups. So what I've been trying to do my first lab day is that I give them a survey the first day of class, like lecture class, and then I go through their surveys and I try to group them based on what they're interested in. So I teach an environmental sampling class. So I'm like, do you like soils? Do you like water? Do you like air? Do you like noise? And then I try to form their groups based on what they're most interested in.
Can I ask how many people don't like air, just out of curiosity?
Okay. Sometimes it's not their favorite. It's not their, they have to drink their environmental media of what they like the most.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, we all like air.
I want to hear the anti-air position, but
yeah, anti-water as well.
Yeah.
So, but I try to essentially put them in groups based on common interests, but I also give them the opportunity to let me know if there's any people that they're not interested in working with, and then I try to keep their groups consistent through the whole entire year. We do breakout rooms in class, and they have the same breakout rooms as their lab groups each week. So I don't want to kind of mix and match people that already are contentious with each other before the semester begins. So I give them the option confidentially to be like, anything I should know before class starts. This is your chance if you're going to do it. And so I do actually do the surveys, which I know is like the smallest percentage of class time. And then the first thing that they actually work on when we get into lab, because we generally don't do lab the first week, is that they have to just like Google some articles based on topics that they're interested in, and then they present them to the class. They have to come up with a group name, they have to come up with a logo, they have to tell me how they did it. So yeah, I kind of do the icebreakers. And they seem to work actually quite well this semester. I had two brothers, twins actually for the first time. And I was like, do I put them in the same group? Do I not put them in the same group? They actually really wanted to work together. So I was like, fine, I don't have to make that decision. So yeah, I kind of like the concept of surveys. My class size is 13. We're all online. Otherwise, I don't meet them. I don't know what they look like. We don't really interact except with the screen. And the surveys have actually been really helpful with the small class size. So like, I tell them, tell me interesting facts. One girl has a dog. All of a sudden I hear a dog barking in the background and I'm like, hey, Quinn, that's your dog, right? She was the only one who mentioned a dog. So like, we could kind of form an awkward bond based on like, they knew I actually read the surveys and I commented on them. And so I'll probably continue to do that in the future, even with my bigger classes, just to kind of create some sort of community, even when we're in person.
That actually came up in an earlier session, that some benefit of this Zoom world was the humanization a little bit of us as people and not just automaton instructors, that like the cat walking across the keyboard actually made us seem like more real people, things like that. When we have the discussion, I think we're already starting to have about sort of when we return to quote unquote normal and what things we're going to retain, what things will just go away. I could see some of these Zoom modalities like that being persistent, like maybe for office hours or extra discussions or things like that. Rivka, your thoughts?
Yeah, so building on what Jamie said, last semester and this semester I've been entirely remote, and so I altered something that I've done for many years, which are just weekly journals, and it sounds like they sort of are similar. I was asking similar things to maybe what you were asking on the surveys, Jamie, but it really one of the unexpected things that I found by altering some of the prompts that I had my students respond to each week. I cannot recognize any student if I would see them in the hall when we went back on campus, because they're all a blue square. But with the alterations to the prompts, especially last semester, I felt like I knew my students way more than I did in any other semester. I asked them, I started off the first day just by acknowledging that there are things beyond our control that are happening to us that really influence how we function in the classroom, and the classroom isn't a vacuum. And so if there's anything that that you want me to know about that, however comfortable you are in sharing, let me know so that I can best support you. And so people would share things about their parents arguing, or they're going home and how happy they are to see their family because their parents are cooking them their favorite meal. Like, it really just the gamut of things that I've heard from my students are both heartbreaking and also just really nice things. And it allowed me to have this one-on-one conversation, but throughout the semester. So I was very sort of pleasantly surprised that I got to have that sort of interaction that I've never experienced before with students, even in the classroom, and the extent that I got to know them. But also, I think what was a huge learning experience for me was that one student, she was late to one of my classes, and she emailed me, and about whatever reason, I don't know, she was up all night, she had some health issues, and just having that. I don't know that I would have responded the same way if they were, came in, late to an in-person classroom. But I think my response was like, it's okay. It happens to all of us. Like, I overslept for a chemistry final when I was in undergrad. Like, it happens. We're not perfect. And I think just that acknowledgement that we understand, like, we ourselves are not perfect. We're not expecting perfection from our students. Just that empathy just went a long way.
So ultimately, just to comment on how this figure is structured, one of the things I was struck by, being someone who has been teaching genomics and bioinformatics classes, is the use of educational data in a heat mapping format. I've never seen, I'm so used to this being experiments in genes. So to see experiments grouped together for educational stuff was actually very fun for me. Grouping together by higher STEM content, lower STEM content. And we've already talked about, I probably would see myself as instructor number 5 here as the way I like to do things, maybe 16, probably closer to 5. And if you were to go into the supplemental data, you could see a larger spectrum of how people checked in on this list as to what they were doing at particular points in the course. It should be mentioned, by the way, that there is COPUS data contributing to this. Everyone in Palm is very familiar with COPUS and how we collect data. And so seeing what people are doing in the classroom at any given point feeds into this analysis as well. So in the last
You know,
2 minutes,
since probably everyone is like me, I would love to just go back and rewatch my old first
Oh,
day and map it, right? I mean, it's recorded, so I could easily do that.
yeah, I get always like, I'm one of those, I don't want to hear my own voice on film and things like that. But yes, forgiving that, it's a very
I don't either, but I'm a sucker enough for some data that I would do it.
It's worth the sacrifice for science, I'll give you that. And so here you see the instructor talk format that I had mentioned before. The idea of positive framing and negative framing. What can be done to sort of build up what you're doing in class to, as it says there, the most frequent thing, building the instructor-student relationship and not inadvertently doing things that are going to be harmful. I imagine some of this negative phrasing could tie into some maybe joking relationships or environments in a class. So I suppose there's a little bit of context lost here. But by and large, what we're trying to talk about here is using what you're saying to make the class as positive an environment as possible. And once again, you see the heat mapping here. Clara explained to me, or explained to us in the last session, what instructor 23 was doing, why they had all this negative phrasing. And I think it was sort of a joking relationship that that person had or something, because when I just talked about this casually, I'm like, oh my God, what is that person doing compared to all the other ones? But remember that what's going on here is using a pre-existing coding framework for looking at how these discussions are going on in class, and does what the this paper is trying to do fit into that framework? And by and large, it does. There's a little bit, oh, that's in the supplemental data, whoops. There's a little bit of tweaking of things into some of these umbrellas that they build, but by and large, we can use the instructor talk framework to talk about what's being done in terms of positive framework, what's being done in terms of negative framework, to build a good relationship, establish ground rules, things like that for your class. I mentioned before, it's not well represented here. I'm a fostering wonder guy. I definitely like to do the whole, you know, this is the same in all the organisms and that's amazing, that kind of stuff. I definitely try to do that on a first day to just get people excited about what we're going to study. So again, results may vary, but this just gives you an idea of the way that some people have, or many instructors have chosen to discuss these new ideas to their students in a way that's going to be productive over the course of the semester.
So I have a quick comment on that, Michael.
Yeah,
I'm
please.
actually glad to read this paper now. As somebody who teaches an upper division course, and I know the lower division courses are not going to be covering what I need them to, I feel like really concentrating on this concept of not being very negative for next fall is probably going to be really important for me. And it's not to, you know, discount the fact that my colleagues just can't cover the content I need, but try to phrase it in a way that is still really encouraging to the students so they don't start out already feeling really far behind. So just to kind of, I teach analytical chemistry and it's 100% based on Gen Chem. So if they didn't cover certain things in Gen Chem, then when they take my 300 level class, it's going to be a bit hard. And the lab techniques that they didn't have last spring that I rely on are going to be a bit hard for them. So I like the concept that we're talking about this, so I can already start thinking about how to positively frame this and make sure I'm setting the students up for success and that they're not going to come in frustrated already. And I think that, you know, for anybody who teaches the juniors and senior levels, like the students have really struggled in the past year. So just really trying to be as positive as possible without bringing, the frustration in terms of we should have learned this, or, making sure I don't say you guys should have learned this, it's good to start thinking about that in advance.
Nancy, your thoughts?
I agree completely, Jamie, with the, start out positive. I do have a question. When I was reading through this paper, one of the questions, it's the end of the semester, and I do a survey that's roughly based on the Cornell survey of how students study, and then I add a couple of questions in just for my own uses. But one of the questions I do at the end of the term is ask the students as they're exiting my class, because this is our dead week, what would you have liked to have known during the first week that you know now that you would have liked to have known during the first week, to get their feedback, because it's fresh in their minds. They've just gone through the class. So I asked that question of students, and I'm kind of peeking and looking at some of the data, even though it's not completed yet this week. And several of my students is, I wish I had known how hard this class was. And I usually, when I'm face to face, I will give students just this is, a 300 level general micro class. It's about the same difficulty as organic chemistry. And I'm not trying to make it sound, oh, this is really hard, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. But I wanted to give them the expectation so they know how to plan their study time. This paper is saying that warning them how hard the class is a negative statement. And I'm trying to figure out, how do you warn them how hard the class is while not being a negative statement? What are everybody's thoughts on that?
Perhaps you could give them an idea of, in the past, I know that people who have been successful tend to spend 2 hours on the material outside of class each week. Just expectations of, or strategies for success that kind of imply you need to get started on this quick.
I could see that.
Or similarly, when talking about goal setting, what's a class that you've struggled with in the past, and what were the strategies that helped you, right? So already thinking about, because that's, I think, a big problem is when students wait until after exam 1 to figure out their strategies. So just kind of planting that seed.
Another component might be to tell them about their work schedule. So if they are the type that work up to 14 hours a day, that it will be difficult to succeed in a course like this. So they may want to re-examine the time they spend on the work, and let them realize that more time will be needed in this course to be successful. Not trying to say it's negative, but just to let them know to plan their work schedule well, so that they have enough time for this course.
Okay. And the remainder of this paper, it gives you the sampling of some of the quotations here that they use for the coding about how the instructor talk fits things in here, and how to sort of do the classifications. I like Earth is different, it's unique, it's not green, right? So I'm like all into the teaching wonder part here. Earth has biology. Yeah, it's pretty vague, but yeah, it gets people maybe intrigued to these particular ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off here, because we're getting to the bottom of the hour and I have to go teach lab. Okay. But this has been a really dynamic conversation today, and I really appreciate you guys taking part in this. I am not sure. I think we're probably done for the summer now, and then we'll come back in the late fall. Late summer, early fall with our next paper. But we'll have some other discussions related to POM over the next few weeks in terms of sort of checking in with how the network is going, ideas for what the network is doing going forward, etc. So please be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for being here today, and we'll see you next time.